Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America. I'm your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, semi-fascists, and of course those dog-faced bunny soldiers.
That's right. Okay, I see you went to an Astros game. I guess they won in an exciting fashion.
Somewhat exciting ball game. I'm telling you, I am on a huge comeback roll right now. So on Saturday, the team I coached, they came from like 11 points, but they had played two games back to back. They came from like 11 points down to win the first one. So then the people who played at the heart of that comeback, right, all the way down the stretch, I couldn't play them again to start the next game, right? So I put in the other people. We fell behind 14-0. It got to 19-1. Then we came back and won again. So then we got in the car and we went to Fredericksburg to watch Dylan Cruz, the great LSU baseball hero, making his debut for Fredericksburg. He was drafted by the Nats, number 2 overall, right? So he went 0 for 5. But they scored 7 runs in the 9th inning to tie the game, right? So with a grand slam, there were 3 grand slams in that game. So there was one earlier in the game, and then the one to tie it, and then they went to the 10th inning, and the other team hit one to win the game. So they lost, but they came, getting off the deck from 7-0 is rare in baseball. And then last night, so we go to Baltimore, and it's 6-3 going to the bottom of the 9th. Our first hitter of the inning is a guy named Jonathan Singleton, who was a pinch hitter. It was his first time to bat for us in 11 years. He had made a long baseball journey. He was smoking weed, and so we got rid of him, right? And he had a bad weed problem. And he went away and he dealt with it, and he worked his way back up to the minors, and he made the majors briefly with Milwaukee, but he got released. We got him back. He's been in AAA, hitting 450-foot home runs. I get the little videos every night. And then they called him up. And so last night was his first game back, and they had him pinch hit in the 9th inning. He walked to start the 9th. And then Altuve singled, and Jordan hit one off the wall that they thought could have been caught, so the runners couldn't go. So he got a single off the wall with no RBI. And so the bases were loaded, and then Kyle Tucker hit another grand slam to put us ahead. So it was, really, I'm comeback city now. I'm loving it.
So that was one of those long singles.
Yeah. Yes. For about a 395-foot single.
Hey, so wait a minute. So who's this guy playing for now in Frederick? Was a team in Fredericksburg? Is it based?
No, he's playing for Fredericksburg. Fredericksburg is the Nats farm team, and he was drafted number 2 overall by the Nats.
Is that an A? Is that the A team? Or?
Yeah, that's low A now. It used to be high A, and they've moved him down to low A. And since the next day after we saw him play, he hit a home run. And then last night he went 4 for 4 and hit a grand slam. So he's well on his way to being a very good pro ball player.
So I need to ask. So what happened to the Potomac Nationals then?
So the Potomac moved to Fredericksburg.
Oh, that's what they did? Okay.
They built them a stadium down there. And the one in Potomac, I don't know if you're ever there, but that was in the competition for worst stadium in all of minor league baseball.
So that was a good thing.
Yeah. It's farther from me. It's harder for me to go, but yeah, they needed a stadium.
That's good. And the Astros are still in second place.
That's right. We're lurking.
Yes, we are. You're lurking. I want to see some Verlander Scherzer matchups for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think we're done with them though. I don't think we play the Rangers.
Yeah, because with the balanced schedule, you don't play 18, 19 games anymore, right?
Right. It's 12 now. Yeah. And so I think we're done. We've won the season series. We beat the Rangers. We get the silver boot for that.
Good for you. All right. I guess I'll, since we usually talk a little weather and stuff like this at the beginning, I mean, we just had a big storm roll through of some sort, though it seems that the government, maybe somebody got this a little bit wrong. It wasn't, this last one the other day, it wasn't as severe as it should have been, though the one we had over the weekend, I guess, or whatever, with this past week, that was a lot worse. I mean, they sent government workers home, and what happened? Nothing much happened, right? I mean,
we got a pretty good little rainstorm here, but it was a rainstorm. I mean, you didn't have to send people home. It was just rain, right? The day before was just rain. That's one of the things that's going on is, like, we've gotten some wild weather, right? The sun we were close to a minimum of solar activity, and it has picked back up. The sun is the brightest now it's been in like 27 years. And throwing off flares and all this stuff again. There's some volcanic activity, right? All those things, bring upheaval to the weather. But what has happened is, as a result of it, the global warming people are out in force now, and they're like, hey, the oceans are boiling. They're boiling. We're boiling alive, right? So, we're not boiling alive. We're having a hot summer. We've had hot summers before. This is not a record-breaking summer. It's not even in the top 10 of the last 100 years in terms of hot summers. In fact, in the United States, it's a little cooler than normal. So, when you hear all this, and you're going to hear a lot of it in the coming weeks, right? Because this is the warmists see this as a huge opportunity to push for action. Just remember, you're not seeing record, and the same people, they were silent, dead silent, when China, Russia, and mainland U.S. all recorded their coldest temperatures ever last winter.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we keep talking about it, just that, I mean, this is weather, and it is variable, and so some places are pretty hot these days, and other places are just a little bit cooler, and it's like, that is the way the weather kind of works, is that you kind of expect that. I mean, I guess it's extremely hot in South Korea. You saw that World Boy Scout Jamboree is on, mass evacuation, basically. Between the hot weather and I guess they've got the monsoon, season kind of kicking in. And
isn't the problem that the monsoons won't come and cool things off?
Yeah,
like,
I don't know.
Rain.
Yeah, so they've got some issues there, but stuff like this happens. I mean, it's just people, but like you said, the climate alarmists, all these fear mongers are out there, and then we have President Biden giving an interview to the Weather Channel so he can pontificate on climate change because he's such an expert.
Right, and then I guess he dusted off the guy's coat or something.
Yeah. There's this video of the reporter, who's a female, and I guess she had a bug or something right around up here. So he goes, "Oh, you got a bug," and he kind of like flicked it off, and it's like, this is Joe Biden. It's like, what's with this guy? Is he
you're a little creepy to be doing that, dude. Other people maybe not so bad, but
yeah, I probably startled the reporter a little bit, like, what's he doing?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but I mean, he on this interview, he says, this climate change was an existential threat to humanity. This goes, hand in hand with our UN Secretary General Guterres, who said, we're in an era of global boiling, which I think you kind of referred to with, we're boiling. I mean, how much more hyperbole and just all this ridiculous do we need from these people?
Right. It's like, I don't know, like when I was a kid growing up, our ocean to go swimming in was the Gulf, right? It wasn't the Atlantic or the Pacific. And if you go to the Gulf, it's pretty close to 100 degrees. The water is, right? The water's warm. It's it's in that hot sun all the time. The temperature of water is determined by very little by the ambient weather, right? Only like the top millimeter or two of the water is determined. The temperature of only that is determined by the ambient air. The rest of it is the sun above and the volcanic activity below. And my theory is, and there's people who believe parts of this and so forth, is that the solar activity somehow causes some of the volcanic activity. Somehow, when the sun gets moving, that energy goes out and the Earth reacts to it. But that may be crazy, but it looks like these things kind of happen in tandem. And so, yeah, you're going to start seeing it from above and below.
I'm just thinking, I mean, shouldn't the enviros be somewhat happy if we're getting more sun? Won't that generate more solar power? I mean, I'm thinking like I should go back and check my solar generation and see if I'm generating more energy this year than I have been in the
Yeah,
past.
I'd be curious about that. The thing about it is like the whole thing is predicated on never being happy, right? Whatever we have is, too hot or too cold or too unstable or too wet or too dry or whatever, right? What they need to do is, if they want credibility, if they want people to act on what they say, what we're talking about will cause X, right? Our theory is it will cause X, and anything else it causes is evidence against your theory, right? You can't say, global warming. Oh, it's getting colder. Well, that's expected in global warming. No, it's not expected. Either gets wetter or drier in global warming. It cannot get both, right? So, I mean, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, but I don't know. I just keep thinking about it's like, okay, so I mean, this thing on the Weather Channel was all about climate change and whatnot. I mean, there are no other political questions, but I mean, Biden does say these things like we've essentially declared a national climate emergency, which we haven't.
Right.
He kind of tends to get himself into these things where he says things that aren't true, which is typical Joe, I guess, in a lot of ways. But what I don't know. I mean, was there? Does this help Joe Biden on his 2024 campaign? Does he come out looking like a climate change war? Does this help him? With those environmentalists, the lefties that want more.
I don't know, because they look at Joe as sort of having to be dragged to the party, right? They don't look at him as an enthusiastic avatar for what they're trying to do. So I think if you get them talking about the crisis of global warming or the crisis of climate change, right, then they're going to look at Joe as somebody who's not an effective person to deal with that. I mean, they say he's done all these oil leases and the copper mine in Alaska and so forth, and the verdict on Joe from the hardcore greenies is not positive.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're right about that. And in general, it's just that Biden has not been known as some like eco warrior type of person,
Right.
and so yeah, and he's kind of been dragged into this whole party. This interview seems to be also part of a calculated maneuver on the part of the Biden people to say, we want to kind of build up his credibility on this issue a little bit
Right.
and polish him up a little bit. He may not, he's not going to be the dyed in the wool, guy that we're looking for necessarily, but maybe it helps, smooth over some things with the lefties. Though I think that, the lefties are going to wind up, if there's no other choices, they're going to vote for him, but it's going to be a difficult vote for them.
Right. And it's going to be an unenthusiastic vote. You get the
Right.
vote either way. Right. But if you dampen enthusiasm enough, then people don't vote. Right. They just don't go that day. They don't consider it worthwhile. But most of the people, he's not going to lose a lot of votes to Trump or any presumptive anybody who we can see on the horizon who might overtake Trump in this, because the Republicans are all going to say the same thing about it, which is, it's not a good place to spend all our money, and it's not a good way to grind down our economy, and it's not an effective political program.
That's right. So we just saw this thing this morning, I guess, or last night, whenever, about Maggie Haberman and the New York Times publishing this memo on, from one of the Trump lawyers about, this potential, a theoretical plan or whatever about electors, and to stop Biden from actually winning to gain the presidency and things like that. It's being reported as a bombshell, memo. Damaging to the Trump people. Is this all it is here on this? I mean, are there just a lot of bad actors in the Trump camp, or what's going on here with the Trump sphere here?
Well, I mean, if you're going to challenge election results, you have to have an alternate slate of electors selected, right? So if we say, "Oh, you're right, we found 4 zillion votes and Trump gets the state, not Biden," okay, where are your electors? They have to already be appointed and in place and ready to go, right? That's all they did was appoint people who would be willing to go vote for Biden. It's legal. The parties put out press releases after they did it. Here's the people we've appointed. That doesn't sound like they're hiding from a crime, does it? If they put out a press release, Hillary's campaign was trying to get this organized before they finally gave up. And they made a lot of the same, accusations about it not being straight. And she tried to get people to be faithless electors, and there ended up being some faithless electors. That is, people who don't vote the way their state tells them to vote, right? So some of them, but it ended up backfiring on her because more of them switched to Trump than switched to her. So it was a negative net loss. But there's nothing illegal about electors. There's nothing illegal about recruiting electors. So it's just something to create noise, and you think, oh, they did something evil. No, they didn't. They did pro forma what you have to do to contest elections.
But isn't this elector thing also part of a thing that's going on in Michigan as well? I mean,
well, Michigan, they have indicted some electors, right? They have indicted some people for this, but I'm not sure. Like, I don't know what they're trying to convict them of, right? I don't see, it's like that's a highly partisan leftist AG up there. So she's just trying to make her bones. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, all of these things, whether or not you like Trump or not or whatever, you just begin to wonder. I mean, I'm not overtly pro-Trump, kind of a thing like that. I'm kind of sick and tired of him to a large degree because I think he just won't shut up when he should shut up. But on the other hand, you kind of wonder about the prosecutorial zeal here, just this overzealousness on the part of all these different people here. To go and make pin Trump up for this and that. I mean, how many more of these indictments are there going to be out there? I mean, I guess there's potentially one more in Georgia, but it just felt like they just keep coming, and you kind of wonder. I begin to wonder, isn't this a little bit too much, and haven't they really stretched the boundaries of some of the law?
Right. Well, I mean, in a lot of the cases, they're like. Yeah, that's right. Every dirty trick they can come up with. A lot of these cases, the people are, the laws. They're literally hooking two laws together to find something Trump did wrong. No other person in America would be charged for anything that Trump has been charged with so far. Not the documents, not the Alvin Bragg nonsense with the Stormy Daniels, and certainly not the Jack Smith Washington indictment. That one, I think they went too far. I think that reasonable people who, like you say, are not necessarily huge Trump fans, looked at that one and said, okay, you're just out to get the guy. You're just criminalizing speech. You're criminalizing things that every politician says and does. And if we're going to go down that route, we'll be locking these guys up every 10 minutes forever, right? So, and nobody's going to want to do it because it'll just be one indictment after the other. So, I guess that's part of what I guess you saw this Mitch McConnell said yesterday, that he hopes the House does not impeach Biden because, we just need an end to the, repetitiveness of impeachments and so forth. I think we have one impeachment to go. After the way they treated Trump, I think it's the base of the Republican Party, as soon as they see enough evidence, which I think they're exceedingly close to doing, they're going to demand that Biden be impeached. I don't think that anybody's going to be able to stand in the way.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get what Mitch is. I mean, I'm not a big fan of impeachments on either side, in general, especially if they look that they're just being political in nature, which I definitely think that the Trump impeachments were. We're getting closer and closer to the to the 2024 official campaign, and so then I look at it just from a strategy standpoint as like will this really do much except for get the Democrat base, kind of, excited and maybe, rally behind Biden where he doesn't have the support today, that type of thing. Because I mean, I always look, I always think that Mitch he's thinking ahead. He's a strategist. He's done a pretty good job throughout his career of getting things through and really protecting the Republicans. And so I kind of understand that bigger picture thing.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, if the Republicans have just, proof out the wazoo, then you can't hold back, right? I mean,
right.
If you have got just the evidence all lined up and it's impeachable, the evidence itself is unimpeachable, then you got to say, all right, you can't sit on it. That would be wrong to sit on something if you've got everything lined up. And that's kind of what I'm waiting to see. Is I want to make sure that everything there is kind of like bulletproof, because the Democrats, the media, all the leftist activists, they're ready to pounce and poke holes through everything. So I want things that are bulletproof, because I know what the other side will do, because that's their modus operandi.
I think they're getting pretty close to bulletproof. They're, I don't know if you saw the thing that came out this morning from Representative Comer's office. He's the chair of the House Oversight Committee that I used to work for. He's talking about, they have, bank records of payments to them from the Chinese, from the Ukrainians, from Romanians. And they, these people were paid money that went to Hunter Biden that was dispersed to the family, just as we have said all along. And after that, Joe Biden made appearances, talked to the people. It was pretty clearly quid pro quo, right? This is what you bought. Now here's your deliverable. The walls are closing in on Biden. And the difference between the Trump impeachments and this is, people could never really understand what Trump was being impeached for, right? He put out the transcript that he was of the call with Zelensky as soon as the point was raised. And so it's like, people look at that and they're like, okay, he said investigate something. Well, now, the farther we go in the rearview mirror of that, the more it looks like Trump was onto something, right? He was aware of some wrongdoing and was telling them the truth about it. So the other thing is, they're not going to be able to, the crimes that Biden is accused of, is taking bribes, delivering policy outcomes, and which that's high crime, that's high crimes and treason, high crimes and misdemeanors, because it doesn't look like it's reported on their taxes. It's also treason and bribery. That's all three of the things you can be impeached for. And so, the cases are pretty easy to understand. Took money from oligarchs, delivered, Joe came and waved at these parties. Joe got the prosecutor fired in Ukraine for them, and some other things that happened that on their behalf, right? That we will find out eventually, despite the decided incuriousness of, the mainstream media. I think Joe's thing is provable. It's understandable. The universe of evidence is small. You don't have to get into his mind a lot for this, because you can see like where the checks went and so forth. So I don't know that, and I don't know if he gets impeached, that, all those little Democrat presidents in the Senate, are just going to blithely vote no, right? They may say, wow, this is a lot of evidence. And, if Joe clears the field, then, Elizabeth Warren's in, Bernie Sanders is in, all kind of people potentially could get in the presidential race.
Yeah. Sometimes I begin to wonder too. I mean, I haven't really looked back to see where I could say that, Biden's, say cognitive decline and, really was first apparent and everything like this. But somehow in the back of my mind, I kind of think like, with all this stuff out there and with Hunter, was Joe fully aware of stuff going on there, or is it kind of like Hunter pulling the strings? Okay, wave now, Dad. Do this, Dad.
The other thing about that one is, it could, Joe may be able to plead dementia here, right? There's it's not impossible. But the other thing is, I guess that, what if they, it looks like the judge took this plea deal back from Hunter, right? Which had him doing no time in prison for things that most of the people convicted of what he's convicted of do 8 or 9 years in prison. And he gets 0, slap on the wrist. They take his felony down to a misdemeanor and pretrial diversion and all this. Two things about it. One is, can he pass that drug test? Could he pass a drug test now? Could he pass the one that, that enters you into the program? Because you got to be clean when you go into it, right? So, you fail your first test, you're in big trouble. So, could he pass a test? And, that cocaine left in the White House, that kind of tells me maybe not, and if the judge comes back and says, okay, you must go to jail for 6 months, right? What does Hunter do? Does he keep all these secrets? Does he go to jail silently and dutifully like a good son? Or does he say, this guy's abused me enough. Here's what he did. And, here's all the crimes, and the Republicans are right about all this. I'm not convinced that he doesn't start screaming bloody murder if he's told he has to spend time in jail, that, he blows off the idea of protecting his dad.
So you think there's a chance that Hunter would basically out his dad?
Roll on him, yeah.
He basically rolled over on his family to save his hide.
Yeah, his brother died, so he rolled up on his brother's wife, right? Yeah. So this is a guy who, whilst married to someone else, right, and then cheated on both of them, all of them, and then there's got the teenagers in there doing drugs and dressing really provocatively, and we have no proof he ever touched them, but that's, why do you make them dress like that and do drugs with them if you're not going to do something along those lines, right? So there's a lot of debauchery in this guy's past to think that he has the character to take this for himself.
Yeah, well, Hunter definitely is not the standard bearer for moral turpitude here. He's just, you just wonder about this and how far it goes. As I was trying to allude to in terms of Joe's, mental competence, is that, wonder if there is that out saying like, I really wasn't that mentally, cognizant of things going on there. This really wasn't me. Joe seems to be doing all he can to protect Hunter, but what's the, after the judge rejected that deal, how much more time do they have to try to swing another deal or make it, or when they go back to finally maybe render a final verdict? Do you know?
I think it's another couple of weeks before there's a hearing, and there's another hearing where they get together and compare notes and see where they are. But the thing about it is like if Joe's defense of this is going to be, I'm slipping a little mentally, and so I didn't really understand the complexities of all this. He can't be president, right?
Right. Yeah.
You can't do that and the other. So, I don't know. I think he's kind of walled off from that argument, unless he is bounced out of being president, or, is forced to at least say he won't run again. Then, then he could say, yeah, I wasn't, to stop the criminality express coming towards him at that point. He could say, yeah, I wasn't really sure what was going on, but he's done, he's not winning in 2024 if his defense is, I'm mentally incompetent. Right.
Yeah, and he continues to, with the gaffes. This Grand Canyon speech and one of the 9, natural wonders of the earth. And you're just like, what is it? Just one thing after another.
One of those odd numbers, unless you count the astronaut.
It's kind of like 57 states, right? And
yeah.
It just things that you pick up, but he continues to, I think, just make the Democrats just extremely nervous about the ability. Go back to the interview with the Weather Channel. Still probably not horrible for Joe Biden in the one sense, but still, he slipped and stumbles enough that it just continues to reinforce, at least in my mind, that, what's wrong with this guy? And,
right.
Have the Democrats got things to worry about. I kind of was leading up to this bigger thing, this thing
But I
about
want to say that one thing before you leave that point is in the 2020. Remember, before the first debate, there was all this talk about how he was sputtering and spitting and couldn't form a coherent sentence. Then he went out and formed coherent sentences. Like he looked like a normal old dude, right? Not particularly off the deep end, right? And I thought that was one of the things that really turned the election, because I think America truly had doubts about it at that point. And Joe's performance in the first debate, it didn't really matter what he said, and it probably helped him some that Trump badgered him the way he did. There's an example we were talking about Trump needing to shut up, right? He could have helped himself by just letting Joe talk, let Joe ramble, don't interrupt his points, just let him say all that and then come back and slice, dice your way through it. But he wasn't able to do that. And I thought that made a real dent in Trump's chances to win.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things is just that, Trump's personality is just there's so much he wants to say and do, and he can't resist kind of the urge to kind of interrupt or maybe even to a certain extent. And as a result of that, here you have Joe Biden. I mean, not the strongest candidate in the world, and a guy who had been largely protected by the pandemic. The pandemic was good for Joe Biden.
Right.
It gave him the cover of not having to go out there and stump and do the normal campaign thing. And so, he became, with people's frustrations about Trump or the anti-Trump forces and the anti-Trump, media kind of things like this. It painted Joe Biden as a viable alternative, as the reasonable guy who's had 30 plus years in politics, and all this kind of stuff. And, if Trump would have just, Joe Biden, on his own, in his own words, can be his own worst enemy. That could have been made a big difference in that 2020 campaign, and Trump wouldn't let that be, and Trump has got to learn that lesson. I mean, same thing for 2024. If you let your opponents be, the chances are they will dig the hole.
They'll make some mistakes for you. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're not going to do any good by attacking each other anyway. It's like the focus here in 2024 needs to be on Biden and Biden policies, not on personal attacks of the other candidates.
Right. It's like, one of the things in there is like they talk about COVID, right? Well, Trump completely messed up the COVID response. Okay, what did he get wrong? And they don't really have a good answer to that. I think you can go back and say, okay, 2/3 to 3/4 of the people who actually died of COVID died on Biden's watch, right? And the school reopening dictated by the teachers unions, was disastrous for our kids, right? That's there's a group of kids, there's a phalanx of about 5 years of worth of kids in our schools that are never going to recover from this, right? They're going to be behind. Bill Walton says a half. The investor guy, not the basketball player, says half the it's half a standard deviation of intelligence of the entire U.S. kids, right? All the kids that were in school at the time lost, collectively a half standard deviation on intelligence. So that's a lot of intelligence to lose. There's a lot of, the schools now are scrambling to get back and catch up and so forth. But, Biden is responsible for that. He made that a much worse problem than it has to be. We're going to debate COVID response. There's a strong case to be made, that Biden was a disaster for it. But that's not what you hear. What you hear is Trump is a disaster. And you say, well, what did he get wrong, right? Because what we wanted I have a thing I think he got wrong. I have two things. One is, after he when he was talking about they had found 15 people with it. At that time, we knew the Santa Clara study was showing that we had several hundred times that many who actually had it. So you weren't going to contain it. You needed to think about starting to treat it rather than prevent it at that point, which we really didn't do. And the other thing he did was he did not. I guess that was the main one. Was just he should have said the thing about the 15 days. But the rest of it, he managed pretty well.
Yeah, no, I mean, so as you're talking about this, I mean, so I noticed today, just when I was looking at X, formerly known as Twitter, as I it shows up, um, the Joe Scarborough, he tweeted out, the Wall Street Journal had an opinion piece about, you know, uh, the fiscal blowout of the Biden administration. So, Scarborough's like, he's like, the Wall Street Journal blames Biden for debt, never mentioning Donald Trump had the worst fiscal record of any president in U.S. history. Stop embarrassing yourselves, Wall Street Journal. Republicans have a shameful fiscal record this century. Now, I mean, look, the fiscal record under Donald Trump in general was not good in a lot of ways. I mean, I just think the Republicans, just ignored a lot of things under Trump. Now, part of the thing under the Trump administration too is that he also was right in the belly of the beast on COVID and what they were doing to try to save the economy and do those things, and that reflects a pretty big chunk of change there, compared to Biden, where, he's taking over as we're getting out of this whole thing, but they
all that
continue,
stuff coming off the book.
but they continue to spend unnecessarily and
Right.
balloon, right? And so there are differences. Republicans in general still have been very good on fiscal policy compared to the Democrats.
Right.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, they keep talking about the job creation. It's like that, Biden didn't create those jobs. Trump created those jobs. They came back once they finally reopened the economy.
Right. Those are the things that just drive me kind of crazy a little bit. It's just that, there are factors that go into these things that happen. The economy went through a very unusual period in the sense of having COVID and what the response had to be and was, and then the post-COVID response, which was just over the top, with just keep throwing
how punitive can we be, basically?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I mean, to me, the Democrats looked at, they look at, what happened there with COVID. Thought, okay, this is great because we have an excuse now to go ramp up spending because very few people are going to stand in our way, and we're going to be able to get through these programs that we've been trying to get through for a long time, and just stick the taxpayer with the huge bill. And I mean, they keep talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, things like, what Inflation Reduction Act? What exactly? How did inflation get reduced?
Right. It's still going up. I mean, the rate has come down a little because basically there's no more energy in the economy to inflate. Right. It's been all sucked out. Right. We're just marking time until something good happens to boost it at this point.
So I did throw this on the list because I wanted to get your opinion, because I keep thinking about this, on Hunter and Joe, is that are they grifters? Are they influence peddlers? Are they criminals? Something else? I mean, who are the Bidens?
So I think my theory is that Obama let Joe set all this up because he thought Hillary would win and Joe would retire, and this would be a nice retirement chunk of change for Biden. Yeah, that's true. Well, Fauci served 5 presidents, and 6, I guess, because he also worked under Biden. So I challenge people to, Trump comes into that situation. He doesn't know infectious diseases, right? I mean, not many people really understand how this works, right? What would people have thought if he would have fired Fauci early to mid to even late part of this crisis, right? I mean, that would have been a disaster for Trump politically, even though he didn't agree with Fauci and he had to spend a lot of time neutralizing the damage Fauci was trying to do. The country's perception, Trump is also trying to manage, and that's why he said that only 15 people were sick, right? When he had to know that it was worse than that, and it was going to get worse, right? He couldn't really do much. He was trying to manage expectations. He was trying to keep people from thinking that, A, there's nothing that can be done, and B, we're all going to die, right? So he's trying to manage to hit that sweet spot of saying, we're close to being out of this, but we have a lot of work to do, and it's still urgent, and we still need to act as if it's urgent. So, Biden had none of that. He had it all. The wheels were all greased for him. The skids were all greased for him. Everything was perfectly ready for him to take over. And he came in and messed it up. He messed up a lot of it. Bought too many vaccines. Tried to force them on people that didn't want them. Wanted to punish everybody. Take your job, your family, your house. Whatever. If you didn't get the vaccines as they ordered you to do. That's some very dangerous fascist stuff that happened in this country during Biden's administration.
Yeah, and when we look back, we say, we can see what, how wrong a lot of these people were. But now, I don't know if you're seeing it, but I certainly am seeing it, kind of where we're getting, lots of health officials are saying, they're very worried about the spike in COVID cases and stuff like that. And they said, deaths really haven't increased or anything like this, but it's still something to look at. But, we're and they're worried about, there are other boosters and other things coming, and they're kind of like, well, we've got to get people to take those boosters when they come out. It's like, and they're worried about the lack of enthusiasm and concern for this. But I don't know. It's like, I see the population overall as being just fine. I mean, I go to these places, we go to a lot of public places, like life is okay now.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Back to normal. And so, I counted one lady at church the other day with a mask. I used to I counted it for a long time, because I go early in the morning and there's not all that many people there. So it is kind of countable. But it's getting less countable. There's more people at church. There's more people coming back now, and they're not wearing masks, and they're past being afraid of this because they now understand that even if you get it, you're probably not going to be sick for too long. Yeah.
I was, so this is somewhat related, though convoluted in its own sense. So there's a Gold's Gym that's only a mile or so away from my house, and apparently Montgomery County has declared eminent domain because it sits right next to the air park here, and and so the gym is going to have to close. The gym didn't own the building. There's some landlord, but they're going to have to close this gym here on the 25th of August. Sending the rest of the members, they're scrambling to figure out, do we go to another Gold's Gym? The closest Gold's Gym for me, and in any direction, is like 8 miles. So I started looking around and discovered that I had been looking into this beforehand because I thought it came up actually via Facebook ad that USAA has a fitness benefit, and they're tied into like 12,000 gyms around the country. And up until, I don't know, a few weeks ago, I think Gold's Gym was part of it. So I was thinking like, oh, I could save money and just flip my membership there. But now Gold's isn't part of that. But so I've had to join this outfit called LA Fitness. And I went over there to check it out the other day. And it seems fine. I mean, it's 6 miles from my house instead of like a mile from my house. So, I'm going to have to drive a little further. Hours are somewhat comparable, so that's fine. But when I was looking at Yelp, I've determined that Yelp exists for the purpose for people to complain.
Right.
Because I went through and I looked at, LA Fitness. They've got a couple locations in the area. I looked at One Life Fitness and Lifetime Fitness, kind of the ones that have got multiple locations in the area. And none of them had a rating higher than 3.5 out of 5 stars. And so when you look at this, so almost everything that you read, when I started reading reviews, it was complaint after complaint after complaint, 1 star, 2 star, and so if somebody gives them a 4 or 5 star, it was being neutered by these 1-star people. But I noticed in one of the reviews, which I didn't even think about when I was at LA Fitness, kind of just getting the lay of the land, was that somebody's complaining about that there weren't like any spray bottles or any way to wipe down the equipment. And I thought, I'm going to have to check that out the next time I go there, because in this post-COVID world, there are still people who want the ability to wipe down the equipment before they use it and stuff like that. And I'm like, I didn't look for it, but I didn't necessarily see it. Gold's has got a few of those around, but I know from observation, not everybody sprays the equipment before or after use. We've kind of gotten out of that habit and stuff like that. But I have, there hasn't been like this big COVID outbreak from the lack of spraying a machine. It's like I wasn't really sure what spraying and wiping down a machine was really going to do. But it was, there was so much paranoia with all this stuff.
That's right. You're just misguided. Had nothing to do with science.
Yeah, but as you say,
you feel like you're doing something. It's a lot of the global warming. It's like, it's like I can't solve global warming, but I can make my contribution. Well, if it's not a problem, you don't need to make your contribution.
Yeah, you talk. Speaking about that, so there was a guy who had posted. Actually, it was a very thoughtful post, very good post. One of the better posts I've seen. He was a Tesla owner, because they were using some acronym. I'm like, what the heck are these people talking about? I would just see these comments pop up, and I didn't see the original thread or whatever as to what this meant. But it was long range. It was 4 letters. I guess it's MYLR, and I guess it stood for something like my Y long range. So it was a Tesla Model Y long range. But this guy had posted all these things about why he was a happy Tesla owner. And it was pretty reasonable in terms of, the first one, though, was the contribution aspect, right? About trying to say, how much he's not contributing, how much he's saving in carbon emissions and stuff like that, saving the environment from. And then the rest were just some fairly logical things about the Tesla ownership and stuff like that. But one of the interesting things, when I kind of just, I didn't look at all the comments, he had talked about the battery, and, just saying that the battery, even after like 7 years, still has like 70% capacity or whatever recharge. But as other people were saying, it's like, $10,000 to $12,000 to replace a battery, that's a big car repair cost to almost anybody. And so, if you factor that in for whatever, say you have to replace that battery in the 10th year, you're still having a major expense at some point in time. If you had a regular gas powered vehicle, what are your savings? A lot of this depends upon how many miles you're driving. People don't, Tesla owners or electric vehicle owners, if they're driving locally, range anxiety is not really that big a deal, because you're just driving around and you can easily recharge at home or find a Tesla supercharger or something like that. It's those longer distance drives. And as my wife pointed out, on any of the drives that we've had, that, when we went to Indiana and back, rarely ever saw Tesla on those freeways, people that were driving along, because there was something I saw the other day that when it came, to gas pumps, gas stations versus EV chargers, the ratio is way out of whack. It's minuscule. There's so few chargers, EV chargers, compared to gas pumps, that it's like, why would you try to take a long trip, in an EV, when these things are, are going to do this.
And if you find one, there's like 5, right? There's like 4, there's 10 pumps at the Sunoco. There's 4 or 5 chargers, and they could be all used. And you can fill up in 5 minutes. You got to fill up in that.
You don't have to wait 30 minutes to get a charge that takes you to 80%.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's I couldn't travel like that. I couldn't.
Yeah. When we were driving to Indiana, and I know you are the master of long road trips, but we kind of like my wife had worked it out to where, how long could we go in the vehicle before we had to stop for gas, and then and she actually had it down in terms of, we're going to stop here for gas, we're going to stop here for gas, we're going to stop here for gas, or whatever. And it worked out. Once we kind of learned the routine, we had our stopping points going and coming, but in both directions. But I cannot imagine, on a 700-mile drive, what you're trying to accomplish in one straight shot, in essence, with only bathroom breaks and maybe grab a sandwich or whatever and just still eat it on the way. I can't imagine having to stop and then wait to get your car charged and do that. It's like, you're already spending 10, 12 hours on the road. You want to add another hour or 2 to that? Yeah. No, thank you.
An hour or 2, you can't do anything. You're just sitting there.
Yeah, you're sitting. What do you? Yeah, it's yeah, what are you going to do? This is not like, a turning point to me for EVs in this regard would be you get something like the Buckies and the Wawas and the Sheetses and the Pilots, kind of the stations that have got massive operations, and you get them to commit to having a lot of charging stations at their places. Then you might actually make somewhat of an argument to have where people can do that. But there's still the other problem of that, how do you convince those big operators to put those in there so they can still make money off of it, right?
Right.
That's part of the problem with all of this. Yeah.
That's right. Woo! That's right.
I did see one interesting point though in this guy's comment about the Tesla. He says there's a doggy mode, okay, which I've never heard of before. Is that you could keep your dog in the car, because this is kind of like the Jill's point here, and just you turn on the air conditioner and you can monitor the car through the app. And I'm like, okay, so I guess you would have no more hot dogs in a car,
right.
Kind of thing like that. That's kind of interesting. But it's like, how many people are going to be using that? In the meantime, that also means that you are using the battery and you are losing miles, so that your car better be close to fully charged, and you better, if you're going to leave your dog in the car, I guess you're not going too far,
right,
in the long run. So there's still just lots of issues. I mean, John pointed out about, it's like, disposal issues are still a problem. We haven't gotten to the point where with the EV battery per se that we've had a long enough track record with EVs that we're going to that we've seen they're ready to go and get recycled. It's starting to get there, but it's a slow build. The environmentalists just don't want to admit that there are environmental concerns that are going to have to be dealt with the EVs, and even just producing the EVs and everything like this. This is it takes not more energy, not completely carbon neutral.
Right. It takes more energy, and the stuff you have to mine to make the batteries is worse than mining than drilling for oil. A lot worse.
So I think there's just lots of issues. All right, I've kind of taken up too much time there, but I wanted to try to squeeze in a couple quick things before we end here. So Democrat Dean Reynolds calling for more Democrats challengers in the presidential race, and then couple that with the New York Times Siena poll showing that about 50% of Democrats want someone else than Biden. Now that was a very small sample there, but it is still, even if it's only a few hundred people, it's still, to me, kind of a telling example that the Democrats are just not comfortable with this. I mean, both this and with Representative Reynolds, they're like, we're not really convinced Joe's the guy.
Well, they're waking up to the fact that, like, there was a thing out. Harry Enton put out something in the last couple of weeks that said Trump is, that's right, Louisiana Gulf Coast. Trump is in a better position than he was at any point in 2016, and that Biden was in at any point in 2020. So it's like it's starting to dawn on them that unless there's some serious intervening events, which they're working on the daily, Trump has a very good chance of being elected president in 2024. Right now, you'd have to kind of call him the favorite. He's ahead by a couple of points. Trump was never below like the high 80s in percent of support from Republicans, right, from his own party. He was never out of below about 88, 89%. Biden's, half the people don't even want him to run, and his overall support is in the low 70s. That's a huge, what about those 17% of people? Are they going to vote for Trump? A few of them might, but most of them, it's a question of whether they will vote, right? Whether they will, go through the trouble of going down there and standing in line and so forth when they're not that enthused about Joe, right? It won't come down to me. It doesn't matter, right? And you get enough of those, and it does matter. So, I think that one of the things that's going on in a lot of this, is driving a lot of these events, all these, charging decisions, and, the pressure they're putting on Trump in the courts and other stuff is driven by, the left has woken up to the notion that Joe is in some serious trouble, and that while Trump's scandal problems are not going to get any worse, right? They are what they are. He's any other charges that are added to what he already has are going to be redundant. Basically, they're going to be for stuff we already know about. We're not going to get any like big revelations from Trump about Trump anymore. We kind of already know what we know. But Biden is just on the cusp of this, right? This is just starting for Biden, right? And it is closing in, right? Every day there's we got a report of this. We have documents of that. We have a witness saying this now, So they're closing in. Of course, the linchpin is, to prove that Shokin was fired for trying to prosecute Burisma rather than trying to not prosecute Burisma, which I think is pretty easily provable. Then Joe's in a lot of trouble because then Joe's on tape bragging about withholding U.S. aid, not his aid, but U.S. aid as a condition of taking the heat off his son. So, I think that's a pretty easy thing for people to understand. And I think that you will see a cratering of support for Biden once that's established.
All right. We're basically at the end here. So in about a minute and a half or whatever, what else you got?
Let's see. Let's look through here and see what you had. So the Pac-12 I would want to talk about for a minute. So the Pac-12 was trying to get a TV deal, and they never were able to do it. So the UCLA and USC opted out earlier this year, and then in the last couple of weeks, the bottom has basically dropped out on that conference, all because they're ineffective leadership. Right? They had a bad commissioner, and then they replaced him with a guy who was not really a sports guy. It was a movie entertainment industry guy, and he wasn't able to pull everybody and make a deal. So now you're going to have, there's 4 schools in the Pac-12 that are unclaimed by the other conferences, and they're now negotiating with the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference, right? And so now Oregon State's pretty close to the coast, right? And Berkeley is. But I mean, have you ever been to Stanford? I mean, you cross a bridge to get to the very edge of California, the San Mateo Bridge, to go out on this peninsula on the edge of Northern California to get to Stanford, right? So, that's about as far west as you could get and be in the United States. And they'll be playing, North Carolina State in league games. So I think that something's got to come along that brings some sanity to this. I'm not sure what it is. But, I'm a big believer in Stein's corollary that things that can't keep happening will not.
All right. Yeah. That's just crazy to see. I mean, East Coast, West Coast kind of thing like that. I thought maybe, you try to do something and build a conference out of what's in the Mountain West Conference, at least for geography. But, it's the money game now anyway, TV
Right.
contracts and everything. All right, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the show. Please, as always, stay safe and stay well. Remember we live in the greatest country in the world, and do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And as always, God bless America, and we will see you again next week.